are gathered here to discuss the non-human and human interaction and interspecies communication and its depiction in art. And this discussion is part of the Open Lab cycle, which is an open media art education program for people to indulge and get some workshop experience also outside of the regular academic art education profile. And this platform Open Lab is open since 2018, and this is already a second cycle and second year of the production. And currently it is produced by Pēteris Sīlis, which we also see here on a slightly pinkish background. And yes, and me, myself, I'm helping him. And I am Anna Priedola. I work in Liepāja University Art Research Lab. I am also an artist myself. And today I will be moderating this discussion with the invited experts from different fields, from art field and from the field of natural sciences. To introduce the participants, we see here Mindaugas Kapševičius from everywhere, from Germany, Lithuania, and he's a media artist, curator himself. So hello, Mindaugas.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I don't like to call myself curator, but I don't know where people find it, but...
it's on your page.
I really, no, I don't know, but might be, yeah, somewhere. But yeah, usually I introduce myself as an artist and yeah, sometimes educator, depends on the situation, but yeah, I'm happy to be an artist. Thanks.
Very well. And Mindaugas will be also leading the workshop, which will happen on the next 2 days on the weekend. And during the workshop, the participants who have applied will produce some artworks also kind of reflecting this issue of interspecies communication. And the other workshop leader is Patrick Borja from Germany. Also educator and creative coder and computer musician.
Hello, I'm glad to be here.
And the participants of this discussion that will be here only today is Laura Puruka from Liepāja Nature House and Innovation Center, our natural science expert.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm also very happy to be here. And yeah, my background is I have studied biology, so I will try to help to understand these things from this biology view.
Thank you. We have also here Vytautas Michalkevičius from Vilnius, Nida. He is, I guess, calling himself a curator. And he's artist himself and head of Vilnius Academy of Arts, Faculty of Photography and Media Art.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here. I also remembered that I have Master in Communication Sciences and also PhD in Communication Studies. So I think I can use my knowledge here in this discussion as well.
Yes, so we'll discuss signals in depth. All right, and the last participant is Paula Vītola, who is a PhD candidate in media art and is exploring natural processes in her art.
Hi, yes, it's me. A lot of people already know me here, so I am covering this topic also with my students right now. So I'm very happy to be here also on this discussion.
Okay, when we have introduced with everybody, I would like to for everybody to also explain their relationship to nature and how is your interspecies communication kind of the most prominent in your everyday, starting with without us. How often do you communicate with other species?
Oh, hello. Yes. Thank you for giving me the first word. And yeah, it's always, I'm enjoy communication with other species, but maybe I would like to start from a question which I always have. And I think the biggest problem for me with communication with interspecies is the communication feedback, because I mean, we always think that we communicate with birds or plants or mushrooms, but usually, I mean, I don't think that communication happens if you don't have a bilateral communication or mutual communication. So if so, communication have to be both ways. So if we only send signal one way, I don't think that the communication works. And this is, I think, the biggest trouble for me somehow to understand how the signal back is coming from the plant, for example. Of course, if I water the plant, I see the plant has some blossoms and makes some seeds, maybe the communication is getting back. But it's you need a lot of time, and you are never sure if your investment in communication will come back. So for me, I think it's always the biggest trouble, and I'm trying to be sensitive to different species and somehow to get in touch with them. But I always miss the tools and ways how I can get the feedback. And if I don't get the feedback, I don't feel that I'm communicating with them.
Maybe the issue is the time scale, that we as humans are just too impatient to wait for the feedback.
Yes. But yeah, if you watch these fast forward videos of let's say blossom coming up or some sprouts of trees, so then you can see how many days and weeks you need to get some results. So I mean the communication is too slow and we are too fast. So I mean, sorry, the plants are very slow and we have a different time scale. So I think it's not easy to find a common time scale for both of us.
Yeah, forgot the name of a philosopher. This who is kind of explaining the plantness, the plant time, and that we as humans should also embrace our plant time, which is kind of our vegetal body is also slow enough, and but somehow the conscious mind is very fast, and we don't get in contact with our vegetal beings, which are also kind of inside of us.
You mean Michael Marder?
Yes.
A philosopher of vegetal life. Yeah, his nice book.
This issue.
Plant thinking, a philosophy of vegetal life. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Laura. How often do you, as scientist and as communicate with other species?
Actually, I do it not so often as I would like to, because when I studied, I did this a lot more than now. Now I work with school children, and usually it's about education, and not so much with these microscopes or microorganisms. What I did in a university. But I would like to add a bit what Vitautas said. about this communication. About the plants, we see the growth is slow, but if we would look in cell level, we would see this communication. Because if we add water, then it's immediately changing, the cells are changing. And my studies were about yeast, and we dehydrated them. And you can see, yeah, this changes in the same time, yeah. But about me, I like to grow plants, and I have a cat. But I think actually, yeah, for me, that's all. And in my each day life, everyday life.
Okay. Patrick.
I guess at the moment, the organisms I'm communicating most, even though I also don't know if you can call it communicating, it would be my sourdough, which is basically my pet at the moment, which I have to feed and take care of and sense, you know, like look at the bubblage and taste maybe also to see how sour it is, in order for it to be well and to be fed at the right times, and for the organisms to hopefully also bring me nice bread. And then I guess, like, if it would be the autumn times, then it would be the mushrooms. With them, I maybe also don't really communicate, but I still would want to kind of hope that I get closer to them, or I wish I would get closer to them just by the appreciation and by the careful, by carefully looking at them, so to say. So maybe it is more in my dreams or in my imagination that we come together communicating, but in the end, maybe it's also just at least me doing a service and carrying around their fruiting bodies, maybe distributing the spores a bit.
Right, thank you. Mindaugas, what is your plant every day?
Well, I think the question itself is very tricky. And yeah, someone is communicating. Computer communicates to me now. Bam, bam, like Facebook or something. So sorry, I will switch it off. But I think the term itself, communication, is very tricky. I don't like using communication because communication to people, I find it already very tricky. And I think people need often an interface for themselves to understand each other. So I rather would use some kind of different terms, like Vytautas mentioned, feedback, or perhaps better to use sensing, or something like empathy. So you try to sense someone and you kind of try to give yourself. So I think if they would think of empathy like communication, so yeah, perhaps, but I would rather use other terms. And in some cases, I would also use collaboration. I think, yeah, collaboration is also one of those terms used in kind of in between species like activities, right? And yeah, I don't know who was the first one to use the term collaboration, but I was very happy reading a text from Andrew Pickering, who contributed to a book I'm working on, and also to a conference 1.5 years ago in Vilnius. So yeah, he commented an exhibition of Bauhaus professors and students, and he said kind of it's more like a collaboration. So you give someone something and you expect of something to come back. So in the end, it's about feedback, and this feedback is more about empathy. So yeah, I think it would be good to try to think about all these differences between the terms, and probably imagine how this communication for everyone looks like. So yeah, communication itself, I think, is a little bit too broad and too saying too nothing. Thanks. Yeah, provocative question.
I have heard also this interspecies communication being translated or called into this the exchange of energy or metabolism is also could be translated as interspecies communication. What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So therefore, I say it is more about sensing and more about empathy as communication. So just humans communicate, and they communicate also not perfectly. I was also having interview with Tucha, whatever. So it was published in one of those Alexandra Tucha, I guess, in one of those portals, and I came, or we came together to the point, and we said, yeah, humans need an interface in order to understand each other. So translating not only speech, but also like feelings and body itself into something digital, perhaps, and then translating back so all the senses would be kind of understood. So also, yeah, metabolism is, of course, a good example of communication. It depends on what scale they would communicate. So yeah, if human is considered being multi-species substance with millions, billions microbiome cells, so then metabolism starts making sense, of course.
Thank you. Finally, Paula, how is your everyday with plants or animals?
Well, like everybody else mentioned here, of course, to call something proper communication, you need this feedback, which is very interesting in talking about communication with other species, because you cannot ever be sure about that feedback, but you have to be very, very careful or mindful to actually understand that feedback if it's coming from plants, of course. And you mentioned also these obvious changes. If you don't water the plant, then it's go bad. So it's in the sense of communication. So I have one plant, and so I'm communicating with that as well. And what I wanted to say is this, that I think that there are basically two levels at least for this so-called communication. So there could be like this very conscious, then there's talk and there's feedback, and you receive feedback, and then it goes on, and there's something that can go like in this unconscious level, but it's still happening because you get those this reaction anyway from you. You know, you see something's going on in the nature and you react to it. So it's some way also communication. And I like that you mentioned this metabolism as well, because that's what I was thinking about. So if there is any species that I definitely communicate with in my everyday life, then those are definitely microorganisms that live with us in our everyday life, because they impact our health, they impact our, you mentioned metabolism, I think. I'm not a biologist. I don't know that much, but I know for a fact that there are so many microorganisms in us that tells our body what to do. So even we consciously with our brain don't communicate with those organisms, we still communicate because we react to it, even in our organism level. Like organisms are more than our brain. And not everything that we can define as communication, it doesn't mean that we don't communicate. It's just we have a very specific way of how we describe this communication. You mentioned you need tools, you need interfaces, language. So that's what we normally understand as communication. But if we think about it, it's way broader. So it's definitely a lot of communication going on. So that's my thoughts on it.
I remembered when thinking about my own interspecies communication that when I grew up on the countryside, and as I was the firstborn, I did not have any friends, and my first friends were basically pigs and cows and cats and dogs and other animals yeah, and I think I communicated with them much more than with human beings. And also, like, really, it seems so interesting for me, these communication patterns, that they are different, also how they vocalize their sounds and everything. And I think I got actually pretty good at copying how, for example, cats communicate with each other, because we always had like several of the same animals, so they communicated with themselves. And then I also could get their attention by like meowing in certain ways, higher pitches, lower pitches, and but I never understood, of course, what it means, and I always wondered, am I like, I don't know, copying some sexually aroused communication signals or not? But it was fun in itself somehow, like to copy these signals. And it has, of course, also has worked in the other way around, that the humans have tried to teach several species to talk human language. And I am wondering what you think about like teaching the other species the same communication codes. Is it possible? Would it be fruitful? Maybe to use technology or not technology, but yeah, how do you look at this, teaching dolphins talk English or something like that? Paula?
Well, I like that you mentioned cats and or talking with cats, because I read about cats as well a long time ago, that we are actually pretty good at understanding what our cat wants, for example. Even though we don't understand the actual sound, we kind of can read based on their facial expressions, like very well. We can know if it's happy or not. So with mammals, I think we can communicate pretty well, and we don't really, like, to me, I am of course not a big fan of this teaching. I haven't even checked out how it works. Like, do these monkeys who know sign language, do they actually can speak? Do they actually communicate, or they just copy some signs? Me, I never, maybe Laura has some deeper knowledge of this, maybe, I don't know, but I think that's definitely, if you want to actually go deeper into understanding that species, that's definitely, for me, I don't think that's the way to go. Like using this our language and trying to teach specifically our language. I think there are better ways we can just learn to understand them better as they are, like these mammals, for example, by analyzing their actions better instead of just trying to teach them our tools of communication. So yeah, that's what I think.
Laura, how would you comment the ethics of teaching languages to animals?
Yeah, I thought about your question, and yeah, I think I agree with Paula. I think it's not, I don't think it's necessary for us to teach them to talk in our way. I think the knowledge is very necessary, but yeah, I think we should more watch their actions, their emotions, and something like that. I think this verbal language, it's for me, in my opinion, it's not so important. But yeah, I think about my communication with my cat now when I talk to him, because we have some kind of communication. I know what he wants, and he knows what when I'm angry or when I'm sad or something like that. But yeah, it's not this verbal language what connects us. I think maybe it's the facial expressions, maybe it's the tears or smells or hormones. I don't know, but yeah, in my opinion, I think it's not necessary. I think it feels somehow forced. I don't know, it somehow feels not natural to the animals to speak, for example, English or Latvian or in any language. I think this is my opinion. Yes, I have to analyze a bit, but I think that's my comment.
If I can mention one more thing, sorry, but I watched this video of this woman who owns a cat. There's a lot of people own cats, but she was totally sure that she had taught her cat use some kind of buttons to ask her what does the cat want. So she had like a 20 buttons. Some of them were even the same color, and her cat was just randomly pressing those buttons, and she was totally convinced that the cat understands what each button means, and that he's definitely asking for that specific thing that the button is assigned for. So that's like I think it's a wishful thinking, basically. So yeah.
Anybody else wants to add something on the necessity and possibility of teaching, usually English, to animals?
Maybe it's more important to learn from other species, not to teach them. Of course, if you want to get to some point mutual understanding, sometimes you try to do one way or the other way. So it could be called a little bit of teaching, but yeah, I just think it's not about exactly teaching, but about understanding. So you express, you want some feedback. So in this case, it comes to the point when it could be called teaching. But I would rather also use to learn instead of being taught. Yeah, but of course, yeah, it's about understanding. If we would speak of interhuman communication and teaching, so it's again, I'm not so sure if we teach the right thing other humans. And there is a lot of critique about what we learned and about what we have forgotten from nature. So I think that teaching is a little bit tricky word, but yeah, of course, we know what it means, or roughly.
Yes. Recently, before this discussion, I remembered an old experiment by Professor Lilly, funded by NASA, where they got a villa next to the sea to teach dolphins to talk English, and they used LSD. They thought that it could like broaden the mind of the animal to kind of mimic and understand the human language. But yes, it seemed that Lily was not giving enough LSD, so the experiment was cut because it did not give enough results. And the other issue was that the main research subject, the dolphin Peter, he got very sexually aroused by his trainer. and this also made a lot of confusion in all of this experiment. And but the worst and this worst thing about all this, when this experiment was cut down and not funded anymore, Peter, who was in love with his trainer, lost the connection with the trainer, who now had to move back to her home, yeah, out of Peter's life, and yeah, they split, and Peter committed suicide. He just stopped breathing, because for dolphins, the breathing is a conscious act. You have to swim up, and so he never swam up. He just was swimming down and drowned from the sorrow. And yeah, this is very interesting how we as humans have these borders of, this is experiment, this is our kind of now this work communication, and we communicate for work, and we have like certain rules and deadlines, how long this experiment and communication will work. But of course, the other species don't understand our concepts. So it can become quite confusing, I guess, for the other species to yeah to understand. Oh, my daughter came home, so I'm a bit confused also now about different kind of communication situations coming into my life. Yeah. And yeah, this of course raises the next question about the ethical aspects of human, non-human communication, interaction, more or less interaction and relationships. How do you think, at what point are we as humanity towards the other life forms? Are we empathetic enough? Should we be more empathetic? What should be done? Is it good or is it bad, the current relationships we have with the others? Mindaugas, maybe you have some thoughts on the current state of affairs.
About feeling the other.
Yeah, feeling the other and the overall ethics of living together with the others and working together with the others.
Yeah, I guess it is tricky. The question, I think, question has to be specified a little bit more, because the others, is also bacteria and viruses, and also dogs and cats and dolphins. It's really a lot, and all the species kind of interact in such a way that they eat each other. Okay, so I'm not so sure about ethics, so it should be also a little bit put more precisely. But yeah, of course, there are things, and if we talk about mammals, so there is a kind of a question, ethical question, a little bit stronger as us in relation to our microbiome, or like bacteria we eat every day and every minute and every second and every millisecond. So I think, yeah, this ethical question is a little bit tricky. And yeah, always with students, we talk about ethics, and it's rather about how or what does it mean when we work as an art piece, or for the art piece, for our expression together with the other species. And it's always a question, what should we do? And there are many approaches how to deal with that point. And on one hand, for example, you say, no, I can't kill my slime mold, because I was living with it like day and night, feeding it every day, like taking photos. It became my pet. I can't do anything. Or let's say if you work with euglena, like flagellates, so it's also a pity to pour your ugrinas, your flagellates into the toilet and flush it somehow. So yeah, they are not there any longer. But on the other hand, if you would think of the environment in general, and more scientific perspective, perhaps, what happens to our environment if we kind of release into the nature organisms we work with. So like we grow, we take care of the organisms in the lab, they mutate in between, they become different species, and if we release into the nature could be freaking out somehow. So it's a little bit tricky question, and from a scientific perspective, or how we would care of environment is a little bit different again. If you don't want to impact your environment, so it's probably better to flush it into the toilet. But yeah, on the other hand, if you work with the organisms, so you want to somehow be polite to them, right? Because if you talk about collaboration, in a way, sensing each other, so it is a little bit of pity to flush it in the toilet. So I think each of us has to get into the point understanding what means to understand each other, to feel each other, and how far away we could go with them. Yeah, ethics is tricky. Everything is tricky. There is no one answer.
Yes, Laura, how do you see is this ethical questions well defined in the field of science, of natural science nowadays, or there's still some work to do?
Yeah, I just listened to what Mindaugas said and thought a lot about this, because for me, it's always have been a very big question, yeah, this science and ethics. And when I studied, yeah, it's always like this in my mind. It's like tush, because on one hand it's science, and I want to explore and I want to know. But the other hand, it seems so. I feel like I'm doing something bad to this species. And while Mindaugas was talking, I thought about this experiment I wanted to tell you about. When I studied in my second year, I had this lesson in human physiology of humans and animals. And usually we looked at already dead animals. It's like fishes or big embryos or something like that. But in this one class, we had this homework. We had to catch a frog. But I didn't catch a frog because I lived in the center of Riga and there was no frogs. But my teacher had catch a frog. And then she called us, and we were a lot of students, and she showed us this frog was like this big, but they have denerved it. They have removed her nerves. She was still alive. And it's a very precise process. She takes off the nerves, and then she took this frog, and she, sorry, I will ask in Latvian because I don't know.
Tied.
She tied it, and the frog was like this, like in the cross, and then she cut it and opened it and put some electrodes to her heart, and we showed how the cardiogram is made. And I was like standing there, and I didn't know what to do. This was the first time when I really understood how this cardiogram is made. So I saw the beeps in the heart, but it feels so mean to the frog. She was still alive. She didn't have any nerves in her, but yeah, and I think the science and ethics it's very hard, because this frog experiment is has made a big impact on me. I really remember it, and but she's dead now. I know something, but she's dead. So yeah, in my personal opinion, I usually try to use only dead animals. When I make some bug collections or something like that, I usually don't kill the animals, or try to use some. There is like anesthetics when they just fall asleep. They're not hurt, but yeah, it's for me it's a hard question. Yeah, and for now also in Nature House we are discussing the possibility for children to dissect the big embryos or the livers or eyes or something like that. And usually the teachers are angry with us because they think it's very cruel. But on the other hand, it's the best way how you can learn. And yeah, and also I have a pretty interesting experience because I worked in Riga in this anatomy in Riga Stradins University, in this faculty where the students in first year of medicine studied, and there were these bodies that were donated to science, yeah, and we had those bodies, eyes and limbs and organs in the boxes, and yeah, it was very, very interesting, but yeah, they were dead. So for me it's hard if it's a living animal. Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Right, and Vytautas, how do you think if like less maybe with a communication form which is seen less problematic as scientific, but keeping pets ethical if like we kind of impose the relationship to the other species and they don't have much saying in that?
Oh, thank you for such a question. It's really you hit directly into my heart, because I was thinking already since 5 years that all the pets, I think, is totally unethical. I mean, keeping pets is really against the animal nature. And if I would have power, I would release all of them free. And yeah, I have kids always asking me to have a pet dog or something else, and I think keeping a dog or any kind of animal, the dog in a small flat, or a rat in a small cage, or a bird in a small cage, I think it's totally against animal nature. And as you can feel it now, when you're watching my video, I'm now upside down and I feel a little bit dizzy. It's totally inhuman. And that's why I think pets should be released free. And of course, if you have your own ranch or farm or whatever, and your dog is running around in freedom, it's totally, it's, I think, acceptable. And you can also pet your wild birds outside your window and give some food in cold winters. It's also fine. Otherwise, I don't agree with keeping pets at all.
I also, as I grew up with like many animals, but it was on the countryside. Now I live in a flat, and I also kind of always tell my daughter, no, there will be no pets, because it's just not good for them. But I think like I would not feel so much empathy to the potential pets of mine if I would not have the experience of like spending so much time with the animals in my childhood, and to really kind of feel how they react. And this is also a question: if we would not be close with the others, would we feel so much empathy for them?
Yeah, but this is the reason I also spent a lot of summers and holidays at my grandparents' farm with a lot of animals around, and I enjoyed their freedom. That's why I understand that keeping animals in a small and natural space, cultural space, it's totally kind of, it's a torture of animal.
What will we do with the dog breeds, though, that basically we created and will not, are like basically accustomed to living with us and be fed and everything? Like,
yeah, but I mean, it's totally fine to have a dog if you live on a house somewhere out of a town. But I mean, usually if you have a dog in a flat, you bring the dog for a walk for 10-15 minutes 2 times per day. So I think it's totally against his or her nature.
I wanted also question or comment. Isn't a domestic cat a little bit of an exception? Because as far as I know, a lot of cats, they are, even if they are allowed to go outside, they just wouldn't, because they feel very much more comfortable living in one room. At least some cats that I know of are definitely very comfortable living in a very small space and are not at all interested in leaving that small space. Yes, I guess it depends on the cat. But I know that some of them.
Cats are the big exceptions.
And I think also cockroaches too.
Yes, they choose to live with the humans or the other kind of pests that we have at home. For example, the little bugs in the flower. But this is the question: if we stop, if we have the crazy animal breeds, for example, the dogs who can't give birth naturally, and how far can it go, this modification of animal body, and how it is acceptable? Patrick, you have kind of more thought more about this. When should it end?
not really. I just was wondering now more, as Vytautas was just saying, no pets at all. Like, where would this fall in, basically? But yeah, I mean, we have already shaped nature to a large extent. So, and I mean, we can't take it all back, or I guess it would be very radical if we take it all back. So also this call for, just letting everything go as it is will, of course, at some point nature will regulate itself again, especially once we are gone. Like, nature will hopefully continue in some way. So don't have an answer really to that, but I think it's an interesting question one.
We are also mentioning the word nature a lot, and I think it's also kind of one problematic word that should be defined. What is nature? What is human? And Patrick, as you used it a lot in the last sentences, maybe you can explain how you understand the word nature, or maybe you prefer actually to use some other word more often when referring to the.
I mean, this is I'm not very precise here in my language when I talk about nature. I'm more like a naive, quite naive in using the term at that point. I guess the biggest question for me then in that regard, especially on one topic, is if nature includes us or it excludes us in a sense. And I mean, now already, when I told about this, then of course I excluded the human, because I talked about the nature. How will they deal with nature? But of course, we are part of. We're a big part of nature, kind of, at least in our impact energy-wise. Maybe not in the diversity or population, of course. Yeah, there's some. Cannot define it precisely, but these are for me the two the important distinction, maybe, like in that term.
Paula, you, I know, are very passionate about the exploration of a definition of nature.
Well, not maybe particularly this definition of nature, but basically how human views nature. And it's very interesting that, like a lot of you probably already know, that it's not it hasn't been forever like this, that the human thinks that nature is something separate from the human. It's like a Western idea from 17th century when the human started developing tools to observe nature and therefore distanced from this nature. And then this divide appeared when humans call themselves as something other than nature. So is it culture or it's what? But then being a part of nature was not what a civilized society did. Civilized society was not a part of nature. Civilized society was civilization. So therefore there is this division. And now humans are, like Western society is again starting to think about it and maybe again go back to this nature and remember that we are part of it instead of just observers, and that the environment is, again, another word, is not only a tool, but we are still of an ecosystem, and that's something that we just tend to forget. So that's why, yes, I think the word nature is a bit problematic, because it kind of creates this division that we are not, that is something that we are not, even though we are it, and then there is just confusion, like what is technology? Is it still nature? If we created it, then the technology is also nature, and then there is even no need for this division and no even need for this word. I just read, very interesting, the name sentence that I didn't have time to go deeper in it, that a lot of cultures and a lot of languages don't even have these words for it. They don't have a different word like for nature and culture. They just have some other words to describe what's happening in the world. So yeah, that's what I think. I think it's a very Western thing to do, to divide this nature and human and culture and technology. So I think you can explore it more, but there is no definite answer whether it's good or bad to do this division.
Without, as Paola mentioned, scientific revolution is kind of this breaking point into like dividing nature from culture, from humans. Yeah, do you also see that usage of tools, what you have now in your hand, do you see usage of tools as something that divides us or makes this division or distance from nature, from understanding that we are part of nature? Are the tools problematic?
Yes, that's a good question. Thank you. I'm not sure if I can answer it properly, but as you can see now, I'm scanning myself with LiDAR scanner and trying to see how the space works together with you in this wonderful setting. And I think we have to skip this binary thinking that nature culture. There is no pure nature and pure culture anymore, and everything is hybrid. And as a lot of research has showed, I mean, also animals use some tools. Of course, tools are of a different quality, and they help us to somehow do some tasks. But I don't know what you mean by tools. Media, technology, what kind of tools you use?
Just Paula used that scientists started to explore the nature via the lens and stuff like that, and it just came to my mind: is it tools that really kind of makes this distance? Is it media that makes this distance, that we feel so separated and different?
First tools were microscope and telescope, that we became observers, like we observe?
Yeah, I think it's related to this scientific thinking and scientific understanding of our world. Of course, our ancestors, we had much closer relationship with nature. Maybe it was more, let's say, ritualistic and more natural. And I'm always thinking about also the food chain in the ecology. And so as long as we are part of a food chain, we as humans, I mean, I think we are totally fine. For example, if we are buried into the ground and some bacteria and worms eat us up, so we give our bodies back to the nature and we feed this food chain, and the ecology circle is running. And in that sense, I think it's very ethical from a point of human and also point of other species to give us back to the ground, maybe. And if you are burnt, so you are out of the chain. So then you are not a food source for our species anymore. So I think religion is also important here. And these views of religion, which gives the human body back to the ground and soil and earth, I think they should be praised as ecological.
But it's not fully true if you're burnt that you're outside of the food cycle, because you become the CO2, which will be bound to the plant. And
Yeah, but we have too much CO2 now.
This is another issue, yeah. But like you don't like just like leave the system.
It's interesting about the role of science really in this division, as Bruno Latour, who is now also talking a lot about critical zones, and Earth as like atmosphere is a critical zone we have to like keep in balance and maintain so we have a space to live in, both humans, non-humans, and all the others. And he was praising the role of science, that science can understand the animals, can translate what there are the other languages, and science should have some saying into politics making to maintain the balance, if one can say that a balance is. Yeah, so how do you think, Laura, how important is science, or is it problematic to
politicians? It's
to
about
make politics, and to keep the other life healthy.
health. Yeah. Yeah, in my experience, I have never been related to politics from this aspect of biology. Never work in cities, pašvaldības, es nezinu, kā ir, municipalities, yeah, but it's with education. But about the biology field and about scientists, I think that politics is pretty complicated because I think you always have to make compromises, and in politics nobody wins. It's always a compromise, and that's why I think in politics there should people who speak about this science-related questions should be scientists or people, humans with good knowledge in this area, because you have to say a lot of facts, a lot of details, and I think in politics it's important because if you want to save some species, I don't know, some bird species or something like that, you have to know the facts, you have to know the details, why they are here and how we can save them, how many are there, and so on and so on. Because it's not only about my belief, what I think is good, but I have to know the facts, the details, and this will make it better, this will make it worse. That's why in politics, I think it's important, yeah. But I also think from my experience when I worked lived in Riga, in biology, I think in Latvia it's good because a lot of we have a lot of big laboratories and science centers, and I think in this area of politics and biology, I think in Latvia it's pretty good. I don't know how it's in other areas. In biology, I think it's in environmental sciences and forests and species, and I think it's pretty good.
That the opinions of scientists are taken into account.
Yeah, that's as much as I have seen. It seems good. Yeah, because we have this very big research center, biomedicine center. I think it's also called like this, and they're very capable and big researchers, and they're known in the whole world. And for example, my classmate discovered the new protein in the second year, and yeah, we have very scientists with very good knowledge in biology, especially in this molecular biology. And but yeah, the finances of course is this bad part of this, but I think it's a problem in all Latvia's academic field, because biologists live from project to project, and yeah, and usually they get money. It's good if some big company makes this project, then you get money, and then you can try to research the things you are interested in. That's yeah, but yeah, I think they're pretty smart, and that's why they are heard. I think.
Mindaugas, how do you think if science helps to gain empathy with other species, or not? If there are other methods to raise the empathy?
Yes, of course, I think it helps definitely, because it's about understanding. If we wouldn't have science, we wouldn't be using probably the word empathy. It will be something different. So the knowledge or our understanding of the world helps in any case. So science, without science, we wouldn't be able to even talk about that. But I kind of I wanted to bring some other topic into the pot, and I was thinking of it's pretty split, science and arts, right? And scientists often ignore arts in a way. Like artists, yeah, they invite scientists because they might help for doing this and that, a piece basically, so collaboration, right? But scientists, if it is something about arts, they start ignoring. I don't know why, because of not understanding arts, because of thinking science is much more important. I don't know why. So I kind of started to think of something different, how to make it more clear and how to make this understanding, mutual understanding, a little bit better. And I started to ask scientists the question, and it would be very interesting to ask Laura about what she thinks. So my question is very brief. Will arts save sciences?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's very good question. Yeah, it's I think I totally agree with you with this argument you made that it's pretty there's relationships between scientists and art. It's pretty complicated. But actually, I think this is the reason why I only have bachelor's degree, why I'm not a PhD in biology. because yeah, for me it was, you know, the science is very like dry. It's too dry for me. It's very hard to sit all day. You are alone in laboratory. I was counting 1,000 cells in each hour to the yeasts, and you're only you, and then yeah, it's pretty dry. But yeah, I really hope that science, that art will save scientists. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I hope this is changing. I hope so, because I have one good example. I will try to look for answer in my head to your question, but I have one good example that I would like to tell you. Now I work in this nature house, and I have microscopes, and then I like to work with cells and so on. I don't have any picture in the computer I would show you. But there was a girl, she is studying in 8th class in art school, in this art high school, and or secondary school, or how it's called. And she came to me and she said she's very interested in arts and in biology. What could I do? And now we're making five paintings. I'm making this cell glass things, and she is photographing it and drawing it, and we will have a exposition of it. Yeah, that's great. And I'm so proud of her. She's only like 15 years old, and she is doing this what you just asked, and this was her own idea, and she's so interested in this, and she's writing some project to this VVF, and I hope the new generation will come and this understanding will come. I don't know. Yeah, but from my experience, when I think about my old teachers in university, yeah, they wouldn't understand art. No, yeah, it's not important to them. It seems like a trash. I don't know why. It seems so not okay. It's because I think art is the best way how to talk with people, how to talk with this with all the humanity. You can say so much things. You can understand so much things from one painting. I hope that the art will save science. I really do.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit to this. Yesterday, we had a very interesting discussion with Michael Schwab, editor of Journal for Physical Research, and he also raised the same question: why the artist knowledge of science is so much up to date, the ones who are doing interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary research, and mostly the scientists' knowledge about art is ending up with 19th century or maybe beginning of 20th century. So the most advancement we know in art is Picasso or maybe Expressionism. So they just think about art as a method to visualize things and put it in a nice way, make a nice painting, or maybe in a most contemporary way, make a nice photograph. And this is the end of the understanding what is the contemporary art doing now.
Well, but in most cases, artists, or let's say students, Vilnius Academy of Arts, I guess what they would understand is also just only microscope, and probably even microscope, not really. And here Laura could comment if things go into like molecular biology, finding new ferments or whatever, kind of something what belongs only to sciences. So art students would be the same like 200 years back. So
yeah, I don't mean students, but I mean artists with experience who are collaborating, who are working with, let's say, biology for 10 or 15 years. So the ones who are interested in what science is doing.
Yeah, there are also scientists who are interested in arts and they are doing arts. Let's say Hacteria, Hacteria.org, and Marc Dusselier, for example, he's a PhD in, I think, something, not molecular biology, something related. But what he does, let's say, with his workshops and other stuff like his networks and experiments, he calls it art. And he's pretty up to date. He communicates maybe not that well conceptually, but somehow he has this kind of grasp feeling. And he says, yeah, it is art. And yeah, I slowly, I start agreeing with him. And I think that there are scientists who naturally feel art and they understand art, and it's not only about Picasso, but it's all about also interdisciplinary arts. Maybe they don't have that kind of background, learned background, like historical, and but they have a lot of knowledge. If they work in this kind of interdisciplinary field, they are not that far away. I think it's equal, more or less. So scientists, there are some working in arts and some artists working in sciences as well. So it's not that gap. When I was raising this question, it was something about perhaps putting into the context. So let's say if scientists would get into mutations of viruses, COVID, right? Mutations, and then they would be kind of analyzing those mutations, going into the details, dividing genes, understanding why vaccination or why one of the method doesn't work. So they wouldn't see the world or this kind of tiny thing, mutation within the nature, let's say. So they would go into the detail, and they wouldn't not necessarily understand this detail what they do in bigger context. So that's why I was starting to think of arts saving sciences, because if we would think of arts, we would think about philosophy, we would think about all up-to-date scientific research, technological research. But if we would think of what sciences do, they don't necessarily understand this broader concept and context, what is happening nowadays in politics, in interspecies communication, if you want, and other similar things. And I'm raising this question because I'm not so sure if sciences have a right track. Maybe it needs to be a little bit critically approached, and maybe it could be a little bit helpful for sciences to collaborate more with arts. I'm not so sure. So I just try to get into this point and provoke people think about arts, because arts usually is ignored or are ignored. And if scientists would start thinking more about speculations or about this philosophical context, so perhaps it could be a little bit better. I'm not so sure, but it's interesting where it will go. So kind of started to explore this kind of critically think of that. But yeah, it was a little bit of a kind of discourse. Sorry.
I guess, yeah, we'll I'll leave this question open, maybe for the participants of the workshop to also reflect upon tomorrow. But in the last minutes we have here, I wanted to open the question, to raise the question about non-human culture producers. If, how do you think if, for example, bacteria or sheep should be given recognition for their input into producing cultural values, for example, cheese and such, like, how do you think if other species can produce art and culture without us? Maybe you have an opinion about it.
Yeah, it's. I was thinking about this. I think it's a really good question, and depends on our definition of culture. When does, for example, if we have a pet at home, so probably this pet is already culture, it's not nature, no? Or for example, if we grow chickens in big farms, so we are not nature anymore, we are culture, no? So this is an interesting question. When does the nature becomes culture? And if we use the most easiest institutional definition, everything what the institutional definition of art, everything what is brought into the art center or art context becomes art. So if you bring a pot with a plant or some bacteria or mushrooms and start all your own laboratory in contemporary art center, it becomes culture very minute of it. It's very easy. Of course, we can convince this with this statement only art professionals. Maybe normal people won't believe that this turns nature into culture. But yeah, I think it's very anthropocentric question. I mean, and I don't know how to find the right answer to it.
You have also contextualized this green cube concept in NIDA, where you worked as curator. You often have invited artists who explore or who exhibit their work into nature. And then I guess you have also observed how other species interact and how they appreciate these artworks. Maybe you have some practical examples. How do other species appreciate art interventions in their living space?
Yes, just to give a small example, I made this definition maybe 8 years ago and wrote some publications about this green cube in the relationship to white cube. And since NIDA and NIDA Art Colony is in a UNESCO World Heritage in a national park, and you cannot cut any trees or pick or some branches or whatever. So everything is protected. So I was saying that every piece of nature is kind of a wall in museum, and you cannot touch it, and it's also kind of an artwork. So it was not allowed to make any land art, because land art its intervention into nature and changes the natural ecosystem. I kind of enjoyed it because I think land art is a little bit already art style from modernity, so it's not a thing not the field which we should somehow facilitate now. And if art is made, usually they made some very immaterial work, and they have to clean up after themselves. And of course, maybe some of the pieces which stayed longer, you need to get a special permission and you can have a piece for a longer term, maximum 1 year, I think. Yeah, but for example, we made the temporary, one artist in the colony, Justin Tyler Tate, made a temporary basketball court from reused wooden pallets. And I think some of nature used it. For example, some fungus and mushrooms started to grow on it, and it was really good. And it started to rotten, and some worms came in. So we were using it as their food. So I think the artists served the food chain, and also humans were enjoying playing basketball, but only for one season, because next summer it was partly broken. And of course, he cleaned up everything and didn't leave any traces.
Good. Patrick, you are here from the field of music, and most of the others are from the field of visual arts. So maybe you can give some examples how musicians collaborate with other species, and do they consider the others as their collaborators, or they just use the others?
I think there's like both examples, probably. I mean, already in music history, for example, birdsong was always or often included, imitated, or also like played in a duet, for example. But this is then again not really communication, but just using the pattern more or less to like just for the pattern of itself, but of course also of evoking like emotions, like or spring is there, for example. But then there are like several examples really of musicians trying to really perform also with animals. I must like quickly scroll because I'm very bad with names. Some guy called Somehow. He did a whole album like basically performing with wolves, with orcas, and with turkeys, more or less playing the music to them and recording the reactions of them. Like I don't know what the animals were really thinking about, or what they felt with that, but of course, like one always also tries to understand the reactions of the animals, even though they might be random or they might be unrelated, or like they might not really react to music at all, but just to the physical phenomenon of sound. I mean, this is, I think, in a lot of these, also in research where they talk about, oh, you play music to a plant and then it will grow better, like if we should talk about music thereof, it's just a physical phenomenon of sound. Yeah, so there is like these kind of collaborations, and then lately there is collaborations in a sense of of the electrophysiology of plants and of fungi, where basically like the electrical signals are then translated again to sound, like directly or indirectly. So you kind of connect, for example, a mushroom with some synthesizer, and then the mushroom will play the music. Another example, which I find a bit cruel, would be somebody who did a circuit bending, like it's a performance practice where you take some musical instrument or some toy and then you like mess up the circuits to evoke some weird noises, and he was like throwing a worm inside the machine. The worm was like kind of wiggling and then basically becoming the circuit bender itself. So there is like examples like this. Others just there is like a Czech composer, Václav Kalak, I think, who was very fond of mushrooms and just wrote pieces about the mushrooms, kind of also just out of appreciation. Yeah, and there's like a lot of different examples there, really different relationships then of the composer or musician to the organism. Also, if he sees it as a dialogue, if he just tries to harvest the patterns, the beauty from the organism, kind of a wide field of experimentation, really, I would say.
I
also like David Rothenberg. How was Rothenberg? His last name. He also kind of emphasizes that music is this communication form, which is non-verbal. Thus, also kind of more similar, at least like formally similar to animal communication. And then he also plays, of course, he plays, forgot which instrument, but together with birds and sorry,
whales as well.
whales too. Yeah. Do you think, that music is a form of communication with animals, a successful form?
I heard that there is a whole album that's sort of scientific, made for cats. Like again, like people really want to do things for cats, and people like it's a commercial product, so you can buy it online. The music that's created specifically for cats and created together with scientists, so they researched that the cats react to it very well, and so yes, that's another approach that how musicians collaborate with the animals in the sense of art. So they at least try to create pleasant experiences for animals in form of music. So that as well.
So they are entertained while the pet owner is going to work and working 16 hours a day somewhere else. Mindaugas, you had this project, microorganisms and their hosts, where you, as I understand, you had this question if microbiota in our gut can change our mood, if it can change also our aesthetic preferences. And I wanted to ask if you really underwent this whole microbiological therapy session, and did you feel some changes in your aesthetic preferences?
What would be your answer?
I don't know.
No, I mean, I'm not practicing, these therapies. I'm doing art, but I was reading, imagining. My work is imagination, basically, and of course, I can imagine my mood changing. I will give you a very basic example, and then my answer will be yes. So let's say you take antibiotics, right, for like 1 week, 10 days long, or 1 week, whatever. So if you would take a look into your poop, probably you will see the difference. And also you will feel yourself different after taking the kind of antibiotic for 10 days long. So I don't need to take yogurt or yogurt therapy just in order to prove. I'm not a scientist, but if from the human perspective, if I would try to remember what has happening after certain therapies, let's say antibiotica, so then I would be able to say yes. And if I do art, so it's more not for myself, so it is it's more for others. So it is a food source for others to think how much impact it could make if you would consume one sort of yogurt or the other sort of yogurt or kombucha or whatever. So it's about message to the audiences. And if audiences have some kind of idea, they could get into the point deeper, and they will find what makes different for them. There are tons and tons of scientific papers which have proven the thing and which cannot prove certain hypotheses, but it makes sense. And for every person, it is individual, I guess. So one bacteria would have impact on aesthetical feeling, and the other, or the same bacteria for someone else will not. So it's about individual feelings as well. So it's yes and no. Yes, of course, yeah. If you want to just question short, so yes.
I was also thinking that I know during the pandemics have started to work out more regularly, and it of course also changes my current moods, but also taking the yogurt therapy, it's really this relationship building. You are dedicating yourself and you are changing your habits, and you become another person. And also this process, not only internally microbiologically, but also you just like your interests changes, and this is also this just our relationship also change our aesthetic or interests or another interests. We have to conclude. I don't know if we have some some common conclusion, but about the others, should we use the term the others?
About other species?
The other species, yeah. When we refer to the other species, yeah, to the otherness, should we call them non-humans?
I think I don't know. I usually think in definitions. I don't know if it's from my studies or not, but I think it's correct from the definition point of view. They're not human. But yeah, I don't know. I think this word nature in this case is very good because we all are in this word.
Vindagas, how would you think about it?
The context again, but to differentiate, the context is much easier for us to speak with others. So if we speak about interaction among humans, often you would need to add non-human species if you want to express a little bit more than humans. Always. So also, yeah, I work on my thesis as well, and always I need to say more precisely if I think not only about humans. And here I also could comment on your other question about contributions by others. So what would be others doing non-human species if we do together like artwork, right? So the question Vytautas was starting to answer, but I think it is very important to start slowly including others like dogs and cats and bacteria into the art production, because you are not the only one who is doing art. It's not about only interhuman communication or collaboration, but often comes into the point also other species. And then, you have to add it. So for the sake of simplicity, it is important to separate perhaps, or to tell a little bit more than this is, okay, not a human species, but in the end point, as I said, also humans are multi-species. So it depends on the context, but I think it makes often sense to say non-human species or human species.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I am quite. I support the holistic approach, and I was reading quite a lot of Bruno Latour and other guys and girls actor network theory, and according to them, everybody and everything has agency. Also, stones and lichen and moss and whatever. So somehow we as humans and also our friends, mushrooms or plants, can somehow think that everybody and everything around has agency, and we make some meaning and we make some change and we coexist together. So I somehow don't support this concept of other. That's my point.
Would you think that, again, the politicizing political tools as giving, for example, personal rights would help? For example, they're giving person rights to dolphins in Indian Ocean so that the ocean cannot be polluted because it's done murder.
Yeah, it's again a very anthropocentric position.
Yeah.
How can you give personal rights not to the person? You have to give animal rights, or you have to give rights to be the animal. And yeah.
Yes. It's interesting.
It's too complicated. I would go and live in the cave, in the natural way of living, but of course there are too many people, and it's impossible to survive if everybody will go to caves.
You are suggesting that we kind of shift this our worldview basically to the more go back to the roots.
Yes.
Yeah,
There are still a lot of countries where there's a lot of land or let's say space, and you can somehow spread the humans back to the nature and other animals and start making friendship again.
so there's
Latvia and Lithuania probably too.
Yes. We can host Taiwan, for example,
Yes.
or Tibet.
Russia.
We should start then the experiment.
And it's interesting that like in Russia, where there are those big forests, there are still a lot of cultures living like very, very close to nature. So I suggest to look more to those cultures and get less like if we want to speak about this interspecies communication, then Western culture is not the best example. Definitely, there are so much better examples around the world, which is not something that we are used to. We are used to this so this is new for us. So we have to discuss it in a lot of ways, but we all have to remember that it's just very modern Western situation and not universal.
I think also with the other, it's important to like, if we see other as this or as this, like if it would really mean there is something next to us, or if like it is this view that, oh, there is humans and we look down on everything and start controlling it, start like governing also over it. I guess this is maybe important because this, like there, I don't think like this otherness is a good term because it just reinforces this.
Yeah.
So hunting animals would be more egalitarian and healthy than keeping animals.
Especially if the animals also can kill us.
Well,
Yes.
If they have the machine guns.
No, some wolves, they can eat rotten bodies.
All right, I guess it's time to end this discussion on the note of human death and wolves eating the rotten bodies. And we meet tomorrow together with Patrick and Mindaugas and all the participants, the young artists who have applied to work on their weekend in this workshop to give us some more practical examples, more tangible and conceptual examples on interspecies communication and non-human and human relationships. Thank you all very much for joining the discussion tonight. Silent applause. See you hopefully soon in life in some nature.
When? In May?
In beach, let's walk. In Liepāja we have like, I was amazed. We during the summer you can just go to the beach and you like go knee deep into the beach and you walk into the water and you meet everybody there. So I thought without us we maybe need to like start walking in front of each other.
Yeah, we can start walking from Nida to Liepāja.
Yeah.
And we meet in the middle. That sounds good.
Yeah. All right, then till the summer.
Yeah.